مرقنا في اتجاه اللشيخ، لقينا 2 من دعم سريع واقفين نادونا ان احنا 4. واحد فوقهم سألانا انتوا عساكر متدربين؟ قلنا له والله نحن ما عساكر. قال لنا انتباه خلف دور. قلنا ما نعرف ان احنا ما عساكر. واحد فوقهم عمر سلاح فيني وخدت السكين فوقي، قال لي يا إرس أنا أقتلوكم كلكم. مسكوا أختي الكبيرة وأمي وساقوهم بعيد وخلونا أنا وأختي الصغيرة مع التاني بقى يسألنا انتوا عساكر؟ قلنا له لا ما عساكر. بعد فكوا أختي الصغيرة بقيت أنا براي، رجعت أنا أقول لهم أن إحنا ما عساكر، بعد اغتصبوني وخلاص.
moderating the first session. You must make sure that we do some preliminaries and then we start. So before we start the serious part, I want to challenge us for about 5 minutes to say hello to someone you don't know. Walk over to someone, introduce yourself, say what you do, where you're from, why you're here. Because I think we all gravitate to the people we are comfortable with. You know, we have our people. So I think we're all sitting with our people. So I want us to to say hello to someone who's not in your people circle, but that you're curious about or that you'd like to know more of, and then we shall start. Because we'll not have an introduction session where my name is, etc. That will take too long, but I'm gonna give about 3 to 5 minutes just to walk to a couple of people. Depending on how fast you can move, it means you can know more people. If you take too long in one conversation, then it means you meet one person. All right, so I'm starting my clock. It's 32 past. Around 35 past, I will be bringing us back to order. So walk to someone, approach someone, wave at someone. Thank you. Class, meet someone. Even if they're on their laptop, say hello to them. A long time. To see you after so long. Were you on the call? Yeah. So,
And after that, I handed it down because he's just like sick today. That is why I'm here. Yeah, he said they're going to see the doctor today. Nice to meet you.
everything. One person. I saw your email. Put the face to the name now. Yes. All right. What you do. All right. Faizat, we are saying hello to someone we don't know. Yes. So go approach someone, introduce yourself, then we start. Some conversations are taking so long. Be curious about other people. Time to wind up, say the last hello, and then we can settle down.
He made it. I saw the invites on our Amnesty.
All right. Yes, please. All right. Let's continue. Abdullahi, you're too late. That's the last handshake, please. Let's settle down. Thank you so much for that. I hope you've actually met someone you didn't know before, and you'll continue the conversation after we are done. So the other announcement I have is that we are also live streaming this session. If you have a colleague, a friend, or someone you think is interested and they could not make it here physically, please let us know and we'll share with you the link. You can ask the colleagues at the back, the tech team, they can share with you the details of how other people can join. So I think that's that. So I think let's get started. I did not get a chance to go around the room, but my name is Flavia Mwangovia, or Flavia, if it's easier for you. I'm Kenyan. I'm a child of Nairobi. I'm a feminist activist, and I'm spending so much time trying to unpack Sudan. The amount of time I'm spending on this very horrific situation is really, let me just say I'm gripped. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm really thankful for the opportunity. I'm really appreciative of the Sudanese brothers and sisters who keep teaching us, teaching me. And while we do that, they're doing that so generously while we try and learn and understand, because you cannot understand the history of a country in 3 years or in 3 months or in 1 month. So there's continuous learning that we're doing. But while at it, we're also bearing witness. We are also reminding each other that we are Pan-African, African brothers and sisters, and we're actually human beings who are standing in solidarity with each other. My day job is that I work at Amnesty International. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for Movement Engagement and Operations at the East and Southern Africa Regional Office. We have 2 hubs in Nairobi and Johannesburg, and I'm based in Nairobi. And I have a colleague here who we will meet later when he joins the panel. So we are honored to be partnering with IN Network and SIHA Network just to convene this space. And we shall know shortly what this space is about, like why are we here? So we are calling it Voices from the Silence, a film screening and public dialogue on conflict-related sexual violence in Sudan. Today is 23rd of June, but really the trigger for this event was 19th of June. 19th of June is the International Day for Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. It's a day that's marked annually since 2015. And what happened in 2015? The UN Security Council passed a resolution 1820, 2008, when basically the first time the UN formally recognized sexual violence as a tactic of war and framed it as a threat to international peace and security. So every year, on 19th of June, it's a moment to take stock and reflect on what is happening. And I think if we were to zoom out of Sudan and actually situate ourselves in the region, in the continent, then you realize the Sudan story, when sexual violence is concerned, is an African situation. It's not limited to Sudan, but today we're here to focus on Sudan. But when you move to DRC, you'll have similar narrations. If you move to Ethiopia, if you move to South Sudan, and so on and so forth. So today we are focusing on Sudan because I think maybe for someone in the room who's wondering what's going on, but I get a sense that this room is very aware of what's going on. I have a feeling we're in an audience that's fully plugged in, but just for the sake of not making any assumptions, is that the conflict in Sudan, and of course, the caveat there of which one are you referring to? The current conflict started in April 2023 between the RSF and the SAF is now in its 3rd year, right? Has had devastating impact, especially and more so on civilians. We are referring to it as a war on civilians because the fighting aside, the people who are paying the ultimate price are civilians of Sudan. So since the conflict began in April 2023, we are now speaking in superlatives. The largest displacement crisis, it's the largest hunger crisis, it's the largest protection crisis, it's the largest displacement crisis globally, not in the region, but globally. So that's the magnitude and scale that we're referring to. And the impact on civilians, now that we're referring to it as a war on civilians, cannot be understated. We have basically witnessed a collapse of ordinary life, homes, the healthcare system, community structures, collapse of services, hunger, and education crisis. And for the purposes of the conversation today is the systematic and widespread conflict-related sexual violence that we continue to witness in the context of this conflict. So we are here not just for an event because we had time this afternoon. We are here to mark the day. It's 23rd, but to mark of the day of 19th. But it's also a moment of collective witnessing and responsibility. We are not here simply to sit, watch, and we have to bear that responsibility collectively in our own individual and institutional capacities. So I'm hoping that with this space this afternoon, we will conduct ourselves in a dignified manner. We'll honor the survivors and the people who continue to bear the brunt. We'll center the perspectives of survivors. We'll create a space for dialogue and solidarity. So we are not just listening, we are also reflecting. We'll sit in our discomfort, but we'll also explore what does accountability look like. But we'll do so in a manner that's respectful and caring, given the very sensitive nature and the very triggering nature of the discussions we're about to have. So for the first panel, basically this is how we'll do this. We'll watch for both panels, we'll have a screening. We have two short films to show you. And then we'll get into the panel and have some reflections. And then we will get into a Q&A of sorts. It'll be two parts, and it's the distribution between the two is more geographic, but the issues are the same. So before I conclude, I just wanted to do a couple of things. One is to really acknowledge and applaud the leadership of our Sudanese civil society colleagues and partners. As I said earlier, you continue to teach, share with such generosity, despite what it means, the weight that it holds for many of you, if not all. So it's just to thank CIHA. You continue to document, you continue to demonstrate what feminist leadership looks like in this moment. We are all responding, but not all of us are being feminist well at it. So as a feminist, sitting in a space looking at CIHA, I'm like, yeah, thank you. Thank you for what you do. For Ayn, for the work you're doing, activism through storytelling, and other tactics you're applying. For me, it's really something I applaud, and I thank you. For Amnesty, what do we bring to this space? Abdullahi, my colleague, is also Kenyan. I'm Kenyan, but we are working on a country that's not ours. But we want to trust that we're also adding value through our documentation, our advocacy, our research, our campaigning, our mobilizing. We're hoping that we are continuing to do right and will stand on the right side of history when the moment comes. Then my last 2 points. I think for me, I'm hoping through these conversations, the question of accountability really comes through. I think that's the area, because just the persistent impunity that continues to fuel what we are seeing. I'm hoping we'll somehow be able to surface that. Because I'm hoping that we're not just here for awareness, but we're here to interrogate what action is needed. And I think for me, I'm already hinting loudly that for me, that's one of the areas that I'm really struggling with. Because the world knows, in terms of awareness, we know. We cannot say there's a knowledge deficit. but what is lacking is decisive action. So as the audience today, you should be reflecting, what's my role as part of this ecosystem? My role as an individual, my role as an institution. So again, a call to engage so that our participation is not passive. It's actually one where we are bearing witness, we are listening with responsibility and not looking away. So with that, I would like to ask us to do something. So I'm going to invite our tech colleague, Arthur, from Nairobi Garage, not yet, to cue, he's cued the first film, which is called I have it here somewhere. 1,000 Days of War on Women, Testimonies from El Fasher. We shall learn about what happened in El Fasher more broadly when the panel comes, but for now, that's what you're going to be watching. But before we click on play, I'd like to welcome us to stand and just have a moment of deep breathing and a bit of silence, just in honor of all that this means for the people of Sudan. And for our Sudanese comrades in the room, just to remind them that you're in solidarity. The weightiness of this notwithstanding, we are bearing witness and we're in this together. So 1 minute, please. Thank you. Thank you very much.
مرقنا في اتجاه اللشيخ، لقينا 2 من دعم سريع واقفين نادونا أن إحنا 4. واحد فوقهم سألانا انتوا أساكر متدربين؟ قلنا له والله نحن ما أساكر. قال لنا انتباه خلف دور. قلنا ما نعرف أن إحنا ما أساكر. واحد فوقهم عمر سلاح فينو خدت السكين فوقي، قال لي يا إرسان اقتلوكم كلكم. مسكوا أختي الكبيرة وأمو ساقوهم بعيد وخلونا أنا وأختي الصغيرة مع التاني بقى يسألنا انتوا أساكر؟ قلنا له لا ما أساكر. بعد فكوا أختي الصغيرة بقيت أنا براي، رجعت أنا أقول لهم أن إحنا ما أساكر. بعد اغتصبوني وخلاص. في شارع شالوا تلفوناتنا وقروشنا وملابسنا، ده ملابس إيال ما خلوك حاجة. كان معانا 7 رجال برضو كلهم جلدوهم.
فرقوا لنا حاجاتنا كلهم. عندي كتاب قرآن قاعد قدامي، واحد قال لي مرة دخل له متدينة، التاني قال له الدين شنو وإسلام شنو، الخلاكم تجوا هنا شنو، عندكم شنو مع دعامة، ومباسكم كملت ولا مالو. هانونا وبهدلونا، كان قاموا فوق نقوموا، كان قعدوا نقودوا. سألونا قال لنا انتوا زخاوة؟ قلنا له لا والله يعني احنا ما زخاوة. قعدنا تاني تهي الشجرة، فاتوا رجعوا تاني لقونا حاجاتنا الباقي فرقوا لنا، شالوا تلفوني وقروشي وأدوني كف لحد هسي خشمين دي فوق وجه. سألوني عندك شنو؟ قلت لهم والله خير أولادي 2 ده شغل تاني ما عندي. ديلك فاتوا لقيناهم تاني في طريق، شالوا لنا حاجاتنا فرقوا لهم دقونا قدامي قتلوا مرة. بنيتي صرخت وآتت. جيرة قال لي أمي خلينا نرجع فاشل. قلت لها بنيتي تاني فاشل ولا نقدر نرجع، خلينا نمشوا. ليل كله ماشيين ما هنمشوا ما يعرفنا. عندي حاجات شايلين بقى لي تقيل، كل شوية نقدا حاجة، مرة ملاية مرة لبسة. في النهاية لقيت نفسي إلا روحي بس شايلي، ومشينا لحد ما وصلنا. الحمد لله ربنا نجانا.
أن إحنا ناسين طلعنا من أمارة بعد ما ناس زيل دخلوا وضربونا وقتلوا لنا أخواتنا. قد طلعنا شارع لقينا ناس ميتين ومجدعين في أرض. مشينا بطريق قرني مع أخواتنا، هناك اغتصبوهم قدامنا وضربونا وأهانونا إهانة ما طبيعية. جنازات أهلنا مرمي في شوارع، فقدنا أمهاتنا وأبهاتنا وما عارفين اتجاههم بوين، وأخواتنا مكسرين وما نعرفوهم وين. عندي بنيتي يتيمة أبو قتلوه في اتجاه مطار، شالوا عيال وما عندنا لا فرشات ولا بطاطين، راقدين في شارع مغطيين بملايات بس.
طلعنا من فاشر ومعانا زي 10 بنات و3 رجال. مشينا هلا شيخ ما لقينا حاجة في طريق، مشينا قرني برضو ما لقينا زول، وصلنا كورما لقيناه نادوا بنات. في راجل شايب كده وقفان قال لهم لا لا أنا آمنة نمشي نخلي بناتي. طوالي قتلوا قدام ولاده قامت بيت هيا أبوي أبوي. بعد داك نحن طلعونا قالوا للبنات تعالوا بجاي. عندي أختي عمره زي 14 سنة كده، قلت لهم خلوه أخيتي ده نمشي بدل. قاموا هدودوني، قلت لهم أخيتي ده أيان خلوه عليك الله. قالوا لي انتي يا أختك يا نغتصبوك يا نشيلوا بنيتك. قلت لهم خلاص اغتصبوني لكن خلوا بنيتي، واغتصبوني.
العيانين كانوا كتار في المستشفى السعودي بياخدوا العلاجات أكتر من 200. في محل النساء والتوليد كان في أكتر من 20 مرة حامل، والتانيات برضو عندهم نزيف. كمان في شفع صغار عندهم سوء تغذية برضو قتلوهم. الدكاترة الفضلوا هناك في المستشفى برضو قتلوهم كلهم. مرقنا يوم الأحد من المستشفى مع الشباب. لما وصلنا قرني شمال الفاشر شباب كلهم ساقوهم في جرارات وساقوهم لحتة ما معروفة. النسوان والشياب الكبار والعيال الصغار كلهم برضو ساقوهم لكن ما عارف لوين. كان عندنا عيانين عندهم عمليات خليناهم هناك، وهسي ما معروف الحاصل لهم شنو، لكن أنا متأكد إنه يكون صفوهم.
مرقنا في اتجاه اللشيخ، لقينا 2 من دعم سريع واقفين نادونا نحن 4. واحد فوقهم سألانا انتوا أساكر متدربين؟ قلنا له والله نحن ما أساكر. قال لنا انتباه خلف دور، قلنا ما نعرف نحن ما أساكر. واحد فوقهم عمر سلاح فيني وخدت السكين فوقي، قال لي يا إرسان اقتلوكم كلكم. مسكوا أختي الكبيرة وأمي ساقوهم بعيد وخلونا أنا وأختي الصغيرة مع التاني بقى يسألنا انتوا أساكر؟ قلنا له لا ما أساكر. بعد فكوا أختي الصغيرة بقيت أنا براي، رجعت أنا أقول لهم نحن ما أساكر. بعد اغتصبوني وخلاص. في شارع شالوا تلفوناتنا وقروشنا وملابسنا، ده ملابس عيال ما خلوك حاجة. كان معانا 7 رجال برضو كلهم جلدوهم.
فرقوا لنا حاجاتنا كلهم. عندي كتاب قرآن قاعد قدامي، واحد قال لي مرة دخلوا متدينة، التاني قال له الدين شنو وإسلام شنو، الخلاكم تجوا هنا شنو، عندكم شنو مع دعامة، ومباسكم كملت ولا مالو. هانونا وبهدلونا، كان قاموا فوق
Thank
نقوموا،
you so much.
كان قعدوا نقودوا. سألونا قال لنا انتوا زخاوة؟ قلنا له لا لا والله يعني احنا ما زخاوة. قعدنا تاني تهي
So I
الشجرة،
think it's
فاتوا
done.
رجعوا
It was
تاني
a
لقونا
short one, but I think it's
حاجاتنا
quite
الباقي
powerful and
فرقوا
clear.
لنا، شالوا
Just to help
تلفون
us unpack
وقروشي
this and understand
وأدوني
a bit
كف
more
لحد
what's happening in Darfur, especially in the context of conflict-related sexual violence, because we can, there's no shortage of violations in terms of what's happening, but that's what we are focusing on today. But also, it's not to say that it doesn't have an impact on other aspects of people's lives, their family life, health, education, etc. So this will just be a pathway through which we discuss the broader. Okay. Yeah, it's just going to be a pathway through which we unpack the broader issues. And to help me to do that, I'm going to invite two panelists. I have Ikhlas Ahmed from SIHA, and I have Abdul Basit from Wayamo Foundation. And as I welcome Ikhlas, maybe I'll just share a bit more about who she is, at least how she's described herself to me. Ikhlas is a Sudanese women's human rights defender and crisis response advocate working with the Strategic Initiative for Women in the Horn of Africa, SIHA, as a project officer. And in her role, she coordinates protection efforts for women refugees and internally displaced persons from Darfur, focusing on empowerment, survivor-centered support, and community-based protection mechanisms. Through SIHA, Ikhlas supports the strengthening of survivor networks, facilitates access to justice, and engages in regional and international advocacy to amplify the voices of Sudanese women affected by war and displacement. Her work bridges grassroots realities with international action, ensuring that the protection, rights, and dignity of women and girls from Darfur remain at the center of policy and humanitarian response. What a huge responsibility. Thank you so much, Ikhlas. And then I will welcome Abdul Basit, who is a Sudanese legal expert. He holds a Bachelor of Law from El Nilain University in Khartoum. I'm doing well. And has been licensed as a member of the Sudanese Bar Association since 2016. He specializes in general law, criminal law, and international criminal law, with a particular focus on Darfur and all of Sudan. So we look forward to learning from the two of you, and I'll just approach. I think we have microphones, yeah. So take this. Yeah, I should have said this at the beginning, but we have interpretation for those who need to listen to the message in a different language. This is Arabic English. Thank you. So, Ikhlas and Abdul Basit, thank you so much for joining us here. Personally, when you ask me to interact with any piece of information or material, I prefer it visually. I'm a visual person, so the 10 minutes or 5 minutes is already enough to really get me into where I need to be. But there are those who prefer to read, there are those who prefer to listen, and there are those who prefer a bit of all. So we've watched the film, but now we need to hear a bit more from you both as experts working in this context. So Ikhlas, the world has witnessed the use of sexual violence in Darfur in particular for over 2 decades against women and girls, especially with the RSFs. It's no longer recent because it's October, depending on how you qualify recent, but the fall of al-Fashir in 2025. Would you maybe tell us a bit more about the history of this conflict, especially from the lens of sexual violence? Because you keep hearing rape is being used as a weapon of war. In fact, in 2003, Amnesty released a report Darfur, rape as a weapon of war. That tells you how many years we've been here. So if there's someone here who's curious, like, how did we get here? What's been happening? What would you tell them in terms of the patterns, how communities are specifically targeted, and what impact this violence has had on the people of this region? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Flavia. And thank you for coming for this important panel. So regarding your question, let me come. So when we talk about conflict-related sexual violence in Darfur, it's important to understand that the conflict-related sexual violence didn't start like or happen after the RSF captured Al-Fashir in October 2023. So, and it's not new in Darfur or in Sudan at all. So conflict-related sexual violence has been used in Darfur for over 2 decades as a weapon of war, as intimidation, and also as displacement and ethnic persecution. So since 2003, during the first genocide in Darfur, and even before that, women and girls from indigenous African communities in Darfur were targeted because of who they are. We also saw the same pattern during the withdrawal of UNAMID in 2020. So after the withdrawal, immediately the attack on IDP camps in Genena started. We have Grinding 1 and Grinding 2 in 2021 and 2022. So this is the signs of violence, and at that time we already know the withdrawal of UNAMID like immediately happened. Like also the war that reputed in 2023 took place after the withdrawal of UNAMID. So that was the first sign of the war, like to be happen in Darfur, and then like we also see that like this war started in Darfur, and now it continues in Darfur. Yeah, like the part of Sudan, either Khartoum or Al Jazeera, like the war has stopped there, but in Darfur the war is continuous still now. The communities are suffering in Darfur. The as also I mentioned that like the indigenous African communities, whether the Masali, the Zagawa, the Fo, they are the one who are suffering now in Darfur. So then came the Al-Fashir attack on October 2025, when the RSF captured the city, as you see in that as you see in that feeling, like nothing has changed. Like the same communities, the same people, the same ethnic groups since 2003 until now, they are suffering. Like, yeah, the militias, they have changed their names from Janjaweed to RSF, like new brands, but the same crimes, they are happening now in Darfur. So what happened in Al-Fashir was also not sudden, it was expected. So before the RSF captured Al-Fashir, the city was like, has been said for over like 500 days. So during the 500 days, so the RSF, they committed like many crimes there. They, and you can even imagine what they did there before they captured the city. And also after October 2026, I think all of you, they saw the videos posted by the RSF, the crimes that they committed there, how they executed people, how they raped families. They are proud of what they did there in Al-Fashir. So also, let me remember you. So the biggest crisis happened when the RSF also, they attacked Zemzem IDP camp in April, where at Siha we also documented many CRSV cases, many rape and gang rape in Al Fashir. At Siha we are also responding to violations that took place there, whether in Zamzam camp, whether in El Fashir, in Ejinena, in Zalinje. We are responding, like we are doing our part, like to evacuate survivors from one place to another. We provide psychosocial support. We are doing like yeah, apart from documentation, we are supporting survivors. So along the displacement, let me also talk about the patterns. So that along the displacement routes, like people who flee Al-Fashir, they flee toward Tawila. So in order for people to reach Tawila, they use some roads like Gerni, Turra, Hilla Sheikh, Bawabat Amal. So there, where the rape took place in those four areas, in Garni, in Turra, and in just 2 days, in 26 and 27, at Siha we documented more than 44 cases of rape and gang rape, for women who were trying to flee the violence, like to reach Tawila. So we documented these cases, like it's involved young girls as 14 years old and young women as 46 years old. So they told us like what they experience there. So also another pattern that deserve attention is detention-related sexual violence. At Siha, we also documented cases involving 12 women and girls detained in a former children hospital, Eastern of Al-Fashir, where 12 women were held there, some for more than 7 months and others for 12 months. So they reported being subjected to sexual exploitation, sexual slavery in the detention side. So they describe being forced to cook, to clean, and also to perform domestic labor for commanders who are there in the detention side. So these testimonies shows us that sexual violence is not occurring in displacement side or while women are fleeing, but also it's happening inside the detention side as collective punishment. The impact also, like if I want to talk about the sexual violence, there is also impact on children actually. So many children have witnessed the rape of their mothers, of their sisters, and their relatives. So others have been separated from their families while fleeing attacks across North Darfur, across all Darfur, particularly following the attacks of Al-Fashir and surrounding displacement sites. We have seen growing numbers of unaccompanied and separated children. So these children are exposed to multiple risks, including exploitation and trafficking, and they recruited by the armed actors and severe psychosocial, psychological trauma. So when we talk about conflict-related sexual violence in Darfur, we are not only talking about violence itself, and we are not only talking about violence against women and girls. We are talking about the destruction of the social fabric, about the destruction of the entire communities in Darfur, the long-term trauma carried by children, the stigma faced by the children born as a result of rape. So this has been like allowed to continue for more than 20 years. So yeah, we should we should figure out like the impunity around this. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ikhlas, for painting for us that picture of where we are coming from, the patterns and the impact. Um, so, if I could turn to just take us forward. Ikhlas has stopped on a point of something needs to be done about this, especially the impunity surrounding it. She's also shared about the patterns that we see, the cycles of violence as we go on. As I was speaking, I was talking about accountability, there's impunity, there's justice. There's just a deficit of accountability, especially where Darfur is concerned. What do we need to do differently, especially for Darfur? That is, we're talking about decades now, over 2 decades. What needs to be done differently? Because we seem to be stuck on the accountability question. I'm sure you don't have a magic wand, but I'm sure you reflect on this a lot. You work on it daily. What do we need to do, and what are you doing in your current role? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Um, it's a short time, and I have to cover this complicated situation in Sudan, especially Darfur. We are talking about, as Ikhlas mentioned, 2 decades of crimes, international crimes, have been committed systematically by the Sudanese government in the past, and now by the RSF since 2023. So the question of justice and impunity, and how can we stop this circle of violence, especially against women and children and girls and civilians in general, is it's the same patterns that happened in the past. Now it's come again over and more horrific again. I think this is turn me back to the to how the ICC intervened in Sudan, because in the past the Sudanese government was not and is still not willing to cooperate and to establish even national mechanism to address these international crimes, so that the ICC had intervened, because the crimes against civilians and against women and children and girls was systematic by the Janjaweed and by the support of SAF at that time. So now the ICC is still looking or investigating in Darfur, not in all Sudan, just in Darfur. But in the same time, even we are supporting the ICC investigation, the ICC will not have the capacity to look into all the crimes that committed in Darfur, because of because the large scale of the crimes, and also we are talking about thousands of perpetrators and commanders who will be responsible of these crimes. So there's also here a shortage of who will be held accountable in Darfur, and who what we can do for the other perpetrators who will not be responsible based on the ICC investigation, because the ICC will just look into the most responsible people, the leaders, the individual who issue the order, who lead through while they attack, for example. So the question of impunity, it's very hard in Sudan, but it is necessary. In the meantime, we need to use all the means on all the mechanisms that are available now. That's why, since the war started in 2023, we in my organizations that I'm working now, we start talking about using different mechanisms not just the ICC and not just in the domestic court or the domestic jurisdictions, that it's impossible in some area, and it's also there's also a lack of capacity, lack of willing to address all these crimes. In addition to that, now, as we know, the state is not covering or not have access even to some areas like Darfur and Kordofan and some areas. So in addition to that, the perpetrators, most of them, they are like out of Sudan or even not in the control of or the state cannot be hold them accountable effectively. So we start talking about universal jurisdiction. We start talking about how can we use the available mechanism around the region here in East Africa, and even if there is a possibility of using this mechanism out of Africa. But we are mainly focusing here in the region, especially this country and the neighbor country over there. They have a jurisdiction. They are all of them domesticated Rome status. So the international crimes have been committed in Darfur and in all over Sudan. We can also cover, because the jurisdiction of the ICC is just in Darfur. So we need to also look into the international crimes that committed in Kordofan, in Al Jazeera, in other regions. It is difficult. It's not simply. It's not easy. It's not like it could be happen like in one day or two. No, it needs more effort, and we are pushing in two different or three different sides. One of them is to prepare the civil society themselves to be ready to document these crimes in a very proper way, and the good practices were like providing for them the good practices of documentation, and how can we use their documentation for accountability purposes, which is also had its own the standard of documentation itself, and how the interview should be, how can they preserve the evidence, and how can we put them in a safe place, which is allow us in the future, in the near future or in the far future, to use it for the accountability purposes. When we find the a prosecutor who will be willing to open an investigation and then start investigating in certain crimes happening in a different places in Sudan or in Darfur. So then we can use the civil society's documentation to be like our guideline to open an investigation. So the second also point that really important, me personally, I start like focusing on that because in the future, in the past of the experience of that for in 2003, there was a lack of documentation and also the lack of the capacity of the civil society themselves, because most of them, they were talking about the crimes that committed by SAF and by the Janjaweed without even identifying who is the leaders and who is the responsible. So now we are talking also about the civil society especially should focus also on the structure of the commanders, the structure of the militia, or even the SAF, or even the warring party, all of them. They should be also focused on who issue the order and where they are now, and whether there's any evidence that they can preserve it and save it for the future accountability purposes. And that could also help us to avoid past mistake, which is, as we know, many crimes, horrific crimes, especially Sudanese know that and therefore have been committed in the past. But the general information that civil society was just collected is to make an advocacy, which is the advocacy itself do not need that high level of documentation. The advocacy is just need like a lower level of documentation. But we are talking about when we talk about the accountability, so we need a high level of documentation, which will be will be open a chance for for investigation in the future. So this is also the second point that I would like to raise. Also to avoid the past mistake by focusing on advocacy, which is important, but also accountability is most important. And all Sudanese agree that the impunity is one of the biggest problem in Sudan, or one of the biggest problem in the political side, or even in the rule of law side, and also in the people's right in general. We have historical grievances in all over Sudan, especially the marginalized area, Kordofan, Blue Nile, Darfur, East Sudan, far North Sudan. We are because I mean the advocacy is just to stop when people know what's happened without even taking action. What's the next exactly what to do? And now we are talking about what's the next exactly, which is the accountability purpose. And that doesn't mean we are ignoring the domestic rule. The domestic rule is also very important, because if the ICC is taking investigation taking place in Darfur, that doesn't mean the ICC will look into all over crimes that committed in Darfur. That doesn't mean the ICC has capacity even to investigate in all the crimes and to hold account all the perpetrators. If we use also the universal jurisdiction, that doesn't mean the this state that have the jurisdiction, they will look into all the crimes. So we'll come back again to the domestic jurisdiction, which is very important and significant. So we need also to consider this, and that has also its own discussion. We will talk it. I mean, in the future. I mean, if we get any chance to talk about this, I think the last point is to start or to continue building the capacity of the civil society. And we're still doing that effectively with the Sudanese civil society to guarantee that they are going in the right side. That would help us to address these crimes, especially the international crimes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Basically, a multiplicity of approaches, universal jurisdiction, we explore domestic pathways, and also just the distinction you're making between documentation for advocacy and documentation for accountability. I'd like to come back to that. If you can reflect on that. What does that look like in practice? What are the implications for civil society, especially from a security perspective, basically what does it mean for civil society to be really engaged knee deep in that kind of documentation, and what have been some of the experiences in the past? But for now, I'd like to turn to Ikhlas. So the question of documentation has come up, importance in accountability and breaking the cycle of impunity. And if there's something I've learned with deep pride, is that the Sudanese women and women in particular are not waiting for someone to come and do this. They're also really on the front line of exploring pathways to justice, pathways to accountability, how we hold communities. We have women-led organizations, feminist actors responding to conflict-related sexual violence in very many ways. Could you maybe just reflect on that? How is that happening? What are some of the challenges they're facing, especially women-led organizations, frontline responders, both from an accountability, documentation perspective, but also just more broadly in terms of responding to the needs of survivors? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I fully agree with Bassett when he mentioned that documentation for accountability purpose is very important. And I believe that it's very important. And that said, so documentation has fundamentally changed the approach toward justice in Darfur for many years. Documentation was limited, was fragmented, and often impossible because of the insecurity inside Darfur, lack of resources, and restrictions on access. And then also Bassett mentioned that the civil society itself. So at like at past, the civil society, like their capacity was not that enough, like to allow them to document the violations. And I believe that affected account, like and that's affected the accountability efforts. So many survivors, they spoke out, and then their stories were heard one, twice, like more than one time, but their experience were not always systematically documented or perceived in a way that could support justice process. So today we are seeing that the impact of stronger documentation efforts in Darfur. We have seen international investigations, sanctions against individuals who are responsible for crimes in Darfur and also in all over the Sudan, and the growing attention to crimes committed against women and girls. So documentation has helped a lot to ensure the survivors' experience cannot be erased at all. And however, yeah, we are doing our side, but still there are many more like to be done. I believe that documentation alone is not justice. It's the only step toward accountability. So what is remarkable in Darfur is that women-led organization, women-led groups have not waited for the international community to act. Actually, they are not waiting for the international community to act. They have responded to this crisis every single day. They are responding. They are supporting women. They are documenting violations. They are evacuating women who are subjected to violence. So women are doing more, like beyond their capacity. They are the reason people are surviving, and they are the reason that communities in Darfur, they are still alive. So they are the one who running community kitchens, organizing healing circles, and supporting survivors of sexual violence. And also they are the one who documenting violations, identifying protection risk, and also they are caring for displaced families. They are filling gaps that left it by the international community, and also the gaps that left it by the humanitarian actors. So in many areas under RSF control, simply carrying out this work is is dangerous, and also it's a challenge. So documenting can place a woman at a risk of intimidation, at a risk of detention, at a risk of retaliation. But yet the women, they are doing their part. They are they are helping communities there. So I remember when the RSF captured Al Fashir in October 2025. We were trying to identify women groups there, so they can respond to the people, to help survivors, like in areas like Garni, Turra, and in Tawila. So because many people have fled to those areas, we initially couldn't find like women group operating in Turra or in Gerni. Eventually we managed to form like a small groups of women, to connect with women on the ground. We supported them to organize themselves. And we also train them into how you can provide basic psychosocial support, and also how to document violation, how to support the survivors, how to identify survivors on the ground, and providing support for them. They succeed. Uh, yeah, they succeed in documenting violations and also supporting survivors when almost no one there, like like in those areas that like no one operating there. Like after the fall of Al-Fashir, all the people from Al-Fashir, they fled to those areas. But like also for me, like this experience, it reinforced something we already knew. Women are not only survivors, they are responders, they are protectors, and they are leaders. Actually, they are leaders. Women-led organizations, they are underfunded. We all knows that they are underfunded. They are doing this work as volunteer work. There are no humanitarian organization persist at all, leaving local women to respond alone to this large scale crisis. So one of the clearest examples in that is the feminist kitchen that women has established across Darfur by support of SIHA. So these kitchens are not simply like food distribution mechanisms. They are protection spaces. So women, they are gathered, they speak to each others, they are doing healing to others, to others there. So so in many locations, women tell us if these kitchens stop operating, people will go hungry. Some also, they told us people will die if the kitchens that supported by SIHA is not operating. So this is the level of responsibility that women are carrying in all over the Darfur. And yeah, they need to be funded and supported. So at SIHA also, we can't do this alone. What women need most right now is resources. They need protection, and they also need trust. They need flexible funding that reaches grassroots organizations directly. They also need protection mechanisms. Like there are many defenders now inside Darfur. They need protection. So hopefully that the partners or the organizations who are there also, you could help them to evacuate themselves. Like this is at least. So they need support also for survivor services, including psychosocial care, medical assistance, and also they need safe housing and livelihood. So most importantly, they also need to be recognized as partners, not only as beneficiaries, because they are the one who are doing our work there, who are doing the work that international community, humanitarian actors, they're supposed to do, but they are not operating there. So they are already leading the response. So the question is whether the international community is willing to support them at the scale that this crisis demands or not. So yeah, they need support actually.
Thank you so much, Ikhlas. You have acknowledged, or rather we continue to acknowledge, that the documentation is not the same. Depends on what objective you're trying to achieve. You have also kind of zeroed in on the fact that documenting for criminal accountability doesn't necessarily translate to justice. Justice is really in the eyes of the people who continue to experience the violations. So when you talk about women-led organizations responding daily, healthcare, food, whatever response, it means then you begin to put at the center the needs of survivors, even while pursuing accountability at kind of criminal accountability in the courtroom, whether it's domestic or internationally. I think it's important because I think maybe Abdullahi will talk about this, because when we were doing our research as Amnesty, I think when we were speaking to survivors, we were asking, so what do you need to happen? What do you need to see happening? And I think if I remember well off the top of my mind, one was I need to see a doctor. I've not seen a doctor since this happened to me. I need a healthcare now. I'm experiencing this and this and this. I need some guarantee that this will not happen to me again. This should not repeat, And then the other point I think was can the person who did this to me be punished? So it's very simple way of saying that just when you talk about justice, talk about accountability, you really also need to center the needs of those who are experiencing it. So Abdul Basit, I'll turn to you because I think Faizat is about to kick us out from this panel. Oh, she's enjoying the panel, so she should kick us out. But just briefly, because we've extended our time beyond what we had expected. So beyond documentation and just what other legal and just criminal accountability, what other legal strategies can we deploy when you look at the situation of Darfur in particular? What else is in our toolbox that we can explore? And also maybe if you could come back to my previous question around what does documentation for accountability mean for civil society? You've heard about Ikhlas saying that when they're documenting, it means then you expose yourself to reprisals. Because if you're going to start interrogating commands and saying it is the commander X or Y who was in the village that day, it means then the natural step is that you begin to bring attention to yourself. So from the work you're doing, from your experience, how do civil society navigate this? Is it their role? And if it's their role, if they can contribute, how can they do this in a way that's safe? And also, what other strategies do we have in our toolbox onto the situation? Thank you. And then if you could conclude while at it, I'll not be coming back to you because I need us to transition to the next panel. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned before, the mechanism that now we are trying to explore is universal jurisdiction. In addition to the simply the universal jurisdiction is mean that we use the national court or the national jurisdiction of the states that allow themselves or that gives themselves according to law, according to their internal law, to prosecute or to investigate and trials the international crimes. Simply, the Kenyan, for example, Kenyan government, they are part of Rome Statutes, state party, and they are domesticate the Rome Statutes in their internal law. So simply they can investigate in international crimes, even these crimes committed out of Kenyan territories, even these crimes committed by perpetrators who are not Kenyan, and the victims also are not Kenyan, but both of them, they are in Kenyan territories. So they can investigate and they can trials these crimes. So this is a way that we could use, and it's a quick, because it could be quick if these conditions came together in one place, but also because the question of the delay of the ICC in Darfur was one of the lessons learned. 20 years, and just one of the perpetrators now have been sent it to ICC, or he thrown himself to ICC, and now the ICC issued their judgment against him, who is Koshep. There's still remaining 4 in Sudan, not being even tried by the ICC, and the victims of 2003, they're still waiting for Bashir and Abdurrahim Muhammad Hussein and Ahmad Harun to send themselves to the ICC and to surround themselves, and they are not. They are now free and moving around Sudan. So the ICC could not get into Sudan by force and took these and take this suspect to the ICC, which is also one of the challenges of the ICC now. We know that. So what we can do, and the question by the victims is still raising. If you went to his chat, this question is still there. I have been there, and they're still asking what the ICC did for the 2003-2004 crimes, and now you're coming again asking us to testify, and you are collecting our testimonies, and you are telling us that the ICC is going to now investigate and arrest Abdurrahim or Baraktallah or the others and trial them. They did nothing for 2003 2004. What Why are you expecting us to give you our testimony again, which is a real question have been raised by the victims of Al Ginena specifically. And so they have a right. So they are in the center of this process. They have to be also convinced that this mechanism it's very important. It's part of this mechanisms, domestic and the universal, and also the international mechanism, and there has to be part, and there has also to be like convinced that this is a chance that we could also chase the perpetrators and take them to the justice. So the civil society, they rule here because for example, the ICC, they don't have access now to Darfur. And even if we are talking about the universal jurisdiction, it's very difficult or even somehow impossible for these countries prosecutors to get into Sudan, to get into Darfur or some areas to investigate and to take the testimonies from the victims and or even trials the perpetrators. So the civil society here, its role is to collect the significant information, to collect the significant interview from the victims and and witnesses, and preserve the evidence. This evidence will be useful for the investigators to build on, and then build also their own investigation, which is going to be like a quick way to get to justice without even without losing our time, because the civil society now, they have access. The only groups that having a good access in most of the areas in Sudan is the civil society by different means. Some of them that are providing services, some of them providing humanitarian assistance, or the others just can also help these victims or help us to understand what victims need exactly to do. For the question of the difference between the documentation for the advocacy purposes and the documentation for the accountability purposes, is like that. The documentation for the advocacy purposes is need the lower level of documentation, which is the basic information of the incident itself. Where is the incidents, what happened exactly, I mean general information by from the victims or the witnesses who witness the crimes or the attacks, or somehow all this information, so that could be, you need to publish this information to the public, which is also not, I mean, not that complicated to collect information. Even you can collect it from the open source sometimes. But documentation for the accountability purposes, you need more than that. You need to hear from victims, to hear from witnesses, to collect some documents, to collect also evidence if you can, and also to understand the context, and to also have enough information about the perpetrator itself, whom they are, what they what they are wearing, and the color of the uniform, the type of the vehicles, the type of the weapons that they were using, and also all the information related to their movement, all the information related to the pattern of the crime itself. What are the pattern that they use to commit the crime based on? And in addition to that, some context, it could be also help for us to build strong investigation in the future, which is the motivation of the crime itself. For example, what happened in Darfur and what happened in Al Jazeera, it has a motivation, cultural motivation, and also a revenge motivation. In Darfur, the crime that the crime against women and girls in Darfur, it has a cultural motivation because the perpetrators, the RSF and the allied militia, they are committing crime against those victims because they are categorizing them as an African group and they are less humanity than them, and then they are committing crime based on that. Some of them calling them many times calling them slave. You are a slave. You are Nuba. You are all these type of descriptions. In Al Jazeera, they commit crime against the groups that they believe, for example, Hikal, who defected from RSF to SAF, belong to them. So they commit the crime against his own people to revenge that because he left, he defected from RSF to SAF. So in the accountability documentation, we need to take into consideration all this type of motivation, all this type of context that the crime took place on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we could go on and on, especially on that angle, but I think we leave it at that for now. Ikhlas, I'll come back to you for your closing remarks. For now, I'd like to welcome a question or two from the floor, and then we can close this panel. Shake up a bit, and then we transition to the next. I can see one hand, two. Any other? I need to see all the hands first. Don't get inspiration after I've counted. I'm seeing two hands. Okay, so we'll take those two questions, and then as you get responses, you'll also give your closing remarks, and then we can transition to the next panel. Please go ahead.
Okay. My question is to Saiha. I wanted to find out how they take care of themselves. I think since the beginning of this war, they have done so much. I see them documenting, doing a lot of advocacy in many platforms. So yeah, I just wanted to know how if they take care of themselves, how they do it, and if they need help from other civil society organizations to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very, very important. I'll take the second question, and then I have a third one here, and then we can get responses.
Thank you, everyone. Maybe my question is to both Abdul Basit and Ikhlas, but also to everyone in the room, all the colleagues. It's unfortunate that we have to see these atrocities happen over and over since 2003, and yet, there's a lot of work being done through advocacy, protection, and also documentation. But in Al Fashir, as Abdul Basit said, was besieged for 500 days. And as we all witnessed the siege, and we know the patterns of violence that happen, I think we all failed to respond to it before it happens. So my question is about early warning signs. We are now witnessing a similar situation that may hopefully not break out in northern Kordofan. Lubayr is besieged as well. So what can we do to prevent, to dismantle this weapon we call violence against, sexual violence against women? So what can we do to not allow it to happen, not react to it? Other than the long strategic action of trying to get rid of impunity in Sudan with the lack of political will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I understand documentation is important, but my biggest question would be, how can it be done in a way that it doesn't re-traumatize the victims? I also understand that when people keep telling their stories over and over again and they don't see real justice, they are sometimes reluctant to keep retelling the same story. I just wanted to ask, how do you address that gap and rebuild trust with victims that they can keep retelling their stories, even though sometimes they don't see that real meaningful change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have 3 questions. One, well-being, how we keep going. And it's open not just to Ikhlas, because it was a question to see her network, but I don't think it's limited to Ikhlas. I think it's for all of us to interact with. All of us, I mean, especially see her colleagues. And then the early warning and the failure that happened in Al-Fashir, and the continued early warnings that's happening in Northern Kordofan. What do we do? Honestly, that's, I think, for me, the most difficult one. And then how we do this work in a survivor-centered way. I would dare say, actually add, must we tell the stories all the time? Can it not be even enough? Yeah, so for me, it's even a question of when does the trauma porn end, really? So I don't have the answer, but it's something we're grappling with as well. Because at the same time, the question becomes, there's those who want the world to bear witness and they want to share, but there are those who we risk also re-traumatizing. I think that's a very, very important question, and I'm also curious if there's any wisdom in the room as well.
Okay, so yeah, I just want to reply to Gaki, on his question about how to prevent the sexual violence in conflict city. Yeah, I just want to say that there is no single solution, or there is no solutions like to prevent sexual violence in conflict settings like Darfur, but but we can do something. As a class, I believe that the accountability is important. That accountability. Yeah, I believe that accountability is important. So for 2 decades, we were suffering as Darfuri people. So as long as those responsible for for these crimes, they are free, and they are dealing with impunity, these crimes will continue. So accountability through national, through the international mechanism is very critical. Second, protection of civilians must be strengths. So I also believe that what's happening now in Darfur is lack of investment in civilian protection. Like we used to have we used to have a peace keeping mission in Darfur, but for some reason the international community, they withdraw that mission. Like the UNAMID mission, they are the only actors on the ground who are documenting, who are reporting, who are the one that also are reporting on the arms that entering Darfur. But after their withdrawal, everything has collapsed. So we need to invest in civilian protection because this part is very important. The international community has failed to protect civilian. Now we see that the displacement camp inside Darfur, they are attacked. So these sides, it's supposed to not be like that, but also because the international community, they ignore the Darfur people. Like I'm also like I'm also like feeling like this is an intentional neglect. They neglect us. The war has started in Darfur, and then it's separated to all over the Sudan, and now it's continuing in Darfur. So we need to invest in the protection of civilians there. So hopefully that the international community will listen to that, and hopefully they act on that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be kicked out. I think I've been kicked out of phone already. So please help me.
Yeah, the first question, my brother over there, actually, I don't know. I don't have answer to provide to you. But what I can say is to prevent what happened in Al Fashir to not happen again in Al Ubaid, we need to talk. We need to talk more to the world. We need to tell them what's going on and how people will survive if this attack is continuous again. And so the international community has to intervene, and all of us as a civil society, as actors, we have to talk about this. This is at least what I know, but maybe all of us, this is our responsibility to prevent it happen again. For the question of how could we guarantee that not to re-traumatize the victims again, what we are doing is we are building the capacity of the civil society. We are giving them a technique of the interview. How can they do the interview with the victims, especially the victims of sexual violence? How can they interview them without re-traumatizing them? So we are training them. We are giving them like a mock interview, which is like a fake interview that we are doing it by experts. So this expert telling them what to do and what not to do. This is very secondly, also the informed consent is very important for any interview that you are aiming to do as a civil society, but also the informed consent that should be very clear for the victims, and you should be also make sure that the victim is ready to give you their testimonies or to give you the information that they have. Lastly, also, you need to make sure that the victims did not provide this information before your interview to any other organization, which is also could re-traumatize him if you decide to interview them. So this is a technique that we are using. In addition to that, the atmosphere, the locations that you are going to do the interview on, all these conditions they has to consider before doing the interview. Thank you.
And Flavia, if you can permit me to jump in for some of the. Yeah, just very quickly, because I know we're also running out of time. I'll start with also the question of re-traumatization. I think Abdul Basit has spoken a lot on it, but I think on SIHA side, one of the reasons why we have survivors coming to us on a daily basis is because we do not document without responding. Our job is actually not just to document. Our main focus is to respond. So when a survivor comes to see her, they are rest assured that they're going to get any kind of support that is needed, be it psychological, medical, relocation, whatever types of emergency grant that they would need, at least to start the healing process. It doesn't, it's not close to what is needed, but we'll give our best to ensuring that they are supported, and I think that's the key part of it. Now, to avoid the re-traumatization as well, at the point of entry when we are providing the response is when we also take the documentation and the information. One of the things that we do document during our documentation process, we also ask if they've been interviewed by somebody else before, or so just to make sure that we're also building. And I think actually with training with Iwayomo in building our tools, it was one of the things that we added in, making sure that even in future accountability processes, it's clear who has spoken to this person before to really try to reduce the re-traumatization. And then instead, the second question, I'm not even sure how to respond. How are we taking care of ourselves? As someone, as part of leadership, I cannot even lay claim to what the team, a class. She sat down here and really expressed what's happening in Darfur. She's from Darfur, so she's speaking from the heart, right? Hadil is going to come up next. We have team on the ground. I cannot say that it's easy, but we're trying our best. We try to provide psychosocial support to the staff. Breaks as needed. We try to make sure that there's an enabling environment for them to be able to do the work that they're doing. And I think that we'll continue to strive. I'll use this opportunity to say out loud, and this is also why donors need to recognize collective care lines, self-care lines, because you do have activists and staff on the front line on a daily basis. And how do we respond to them if the institution cannot even say, let me put out, a few resources to have them just unwind, right? And I think that's it. But the most important is we do have psychologists that we have on staff, to make sure that they're able to at least express themselves and try to, unleash, some of the burdens that they're carrying. Thank you. Flavia, now I'm calling you out openly.
Okay, yeah, as Faizat mentioned, I'm personally from Darfur and I'm from Al Fashir. I was born there and all my life, yeah, I came from Al Fashir. So when the RSF, the PT, like, like the video that were posted by the RSF, I have like me. Yeah, I viewed all the videos that the RSF posted, just like to see my families, to see like what happened to my people, and also like I see the psychosocial support like as luxury because my people there they are suffering. Like yeah, so and then before the capture of Al Fashir, I was in a cleaner, just like 10 days before the RSF captured Al Fashir, and I was there, like I listened to women who are experience Zamzam camp events. They are also my families, but I see the psychosocial support itself like as a luxury, like for me as a class, because I can't because like yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Colleagues, thank you so much for listening. I would like to apologize for going over time, but at the same time, I'm like, no, we have to take this time and actually give space to this conversation. So I appreciate your patience. I would like to really thank Ikhlas. I have had the honor and privilege of being in the same room as Ikhlas severally since I started doing this work. And every time I keep saying, no, we cannot be asking those who are on the, like literally in the mix in this way, to be the ones to be walking the corridors and still trying to make a case. Of course, they're the ones who are directly impacted, but we really need to up our game collectively. We really, really need to up our game and stand in the space where we can. And I'm really sorry, class, but again, I have immense respect and pride for both of you for sharing your wealth of expertise, your experience, the difficulties notwithstanding. And we do not take that generosity for granted. And I dare speak on all of our behalf. And I really thank you for the time you've given us this afternoon. I've learned a lot, and I continue working in solidarity with you. So kindly let's give them a round of applause, and then we go to the next panel. Yeah. Thank you. So this is where I'm kicked out and hand over to Faizat. But as Faizat approaches, I'd like us to do something. For those who came late, later, we did a thing where you just approach a person who you don't know, you've never met before, introduce yourself, say where are you from. I'm looking here because you're the ones at least I remember who came in later. So feel free to just take a minute as Faizat approaches and she takes over. 1 minute, literally. You did it. So you just moved. Okay. Is there a newcomer entry point? Somebody? No. You're the ones I suspected, but you're good. Okay. So then Faizat, over to you. If you'd like a glass of water, cup of tea, do that while she transitions us to the next. So can you cue it? Please cue it. At this point, we are on overtime. Thank you.
عمري 25 سنة، متزوجة اللي عندي ولدين. يعني الحمد لله إن إحنا حصل معانا موقف ما يتخيلناه، يعني نقول ده ربنا كاتبه لينا. يعني إحنا حوالي الساعة 12 جونا 7 نفر. ال7 ديل 2 مسكوا أخوي وأبوي تحت، حطوا لهم السلاح في راسهم، وال5 ديل جو طالعين علينا فوق. ال2 وقفوا مع أخوي وأمي في البرندة، وال3 ديل واحد خش لوحده في الغرفة.
عمري 15 سنة وبقرأ في سنة سادس، هذول بخشوا ولا متوسط. بعدين جوا أبوي برا لقوا قاعد معاه أخوي، نفرين قعدوا مع أبوي وال5 جونا فوق. جا واحد هنا 3 خشوا علينا نحن، وفي البرندة جا هددوا أمي وأبوي وهنا أخوي قعدهم، واحتدوا على أخواتي واحتدوا علينا ذاتي. يعني بنقول الحمد لله.
مشينا المستشفى، عملنا التحاليل طلعت نظيفة. والله أنا كان ما عندي أمل إنه، يعني كان أنا أصلا عندي مشروع قايمة عليه، عاملة لي كوافير في البيت. يعني كنت قبل الحرب وقبل ما أتزوج وبعد ما أتزوجت برضه نفس الشيء. يعني ذات أسر أجلي، يعني واقفة منه لحكاية سنة هو ما فيش قبل الحرب. بعد الحرب عنده 2 سنين، يعني كده دي السنة الرابعة، يعني ما عارفة هو حي ولا ميت. الاحتداءات دي فيها ضرب وده قلتنا واغتصابات. يعني احنا ما قلنا بننجى من الشيء ده، لدرجة انه لو واحد قال داري يكورك ولا ينادي زول خاتل لنا السلاح والسكاكين، يعني ما بخلوك تطلع. يعني الحمد لله المرحلة دي عديناها. ما هي الأكتر يعني مننا يتأثر الشديد، يعني خشت لدرجة انه خشت فيها حاجة نفسية عديد. البنت ما بتتكلم مع زول، ماشي الأسبوع الأول الثاني ما بتتكلم مع زول.
حاسة بأمان، لأنه صحباتي قعدت معي متفقات معي سوا، ما بيخلوني أطلع من المدرسة، لأنه كان حصلت علينا مرحلة كده. يعني الشعور ذاته هنا غريب علينا. بنقعد مع صحباتي ونفطر سوا ونتونس، يعني ما بحس بأي شيء تاني قبل كده. يعني بحوم قاعدة بس في الحاضر الحالي هسي أنا مع الفيو.
نحن ما كنا بنطلع برا دي نهاية، ما في طريقة، بس بنكون قاعدين في البيت. بعد مرات بنكون زهجانين، زهقنا شديد كده، نشيل مصحف بنقرأ، نحرص لحد ما تجينا المغرب، نقعد نتعشى ويزول بيمشي برقد بيهم. يعني ما كان في حاجة جديدة، كل يوم نفس الشي، زيت الطيارة حايمة في راسنا. كل شويتين نتدسى تحت السرير ونمرق من تحت السرير وكده يعني.
يعني من الساعة 5 لا راجل ولا مرة ما بخلوه يطلع، يعني بس من الصباح لحد الساعة، يعني من صلاة الصبح الواحد بيطلع بيجيب ملح لأولاده وبيجي راجع، الساعة 5 ما بخلوه، وبالليل ما في، لأنه المحلات كلها بس ملانة بس هم، يعني لا داخل لا ماري.
أنا المفترض أكون هسي في تالت متوسط، لكن مع ما امتحنت سادس وما في طريقة أنا أمشي أولى متوسط إلا امتحن سادس حتى نمشي المرحلة التانية، فقلت ما في مشكلة ورجعت سادس وبكل عزيمة، وقلت إن شاء الله حجيب نسبة كبيرة وإن شاء الله أفرح بها أمي وأبوي وتعبوا معانا شديد والله أمي وأبوي ده نتفوق ليهم، دي أقدر ده أبسط حاجة نحن ممكن نقدمها لهم.
قدرت أسجل أولادي كلهم في المدرسة الحكومية والحمد لله عشان يتلقوا تعليم، وعندي بنتي واحدة في ممتحنة السنة دي، المفترض كانت تكون في ثالثة متوسط، لكن بسبب إن أنا ما نزلت السنة اللي فاتت لازم تمتحن الصف السادس. عانيت كتير ومشيت كتير وفتشت كتير عشان ألقى مثلا تخفيض لي رسوم أو كده أو كده، لكن برضو يعني الأخوان المدراء بتاع المدارس ربنا يجزيهم كل خير برضو ما قصروا لما أنا شرحت لهم ظرفي الخاص هم وافقوا.
بس أنا ما عندي كتب، شايلة في شنطتي كل 4 كراسات، ونحن سادس بنشيل دستتين بتاعت كراسات، شايلة 4. يا هو مشيت قلت لصاحبتي واحدة كان عندها كراس زائد تديني له تفوقه، يعني هم برضو بيتكاتفوا معي بدوني ادوني غاية الحمد لله. بس مطالبة للكتب، أهم شيء عندي الكتب، وأنا أصلا في الدراسة دي أهم شيء عندي في الدراسة أكتر شيء الدراسة دي بس، يعني بتولى أكتر شيء الدراسة، وما شاء الله بنجح، رغبتي عالية في النجاح يعني.
معظم الطلاب نجحوا مع أسر من المناطق الملتهبة، مناطق النزاع، لمناطق آمنة. طبعا التأثير كان كبير جدا جدا بتغيير البيئة، تغيير المكان، تغيير الحالة الاقتصادية تغيرت تماما، المستوى اللي كان بيعيش فيه الطالب، المدارس نفسها. هل المدارس يعني ظلت كما هي؟ لا، بنلقى أنه المدارس تضررت ضرر كبير جدا جدا. يعني في مدارس فقدت الأساس، فقدت يعني الأدوات بتاعتها المكتبية، فقدت الكتب، يعني حتى في مدارس فقدت البيئة اللي هي الأشجار بتاعتها، يعني تعرضت للقطع. في مدارس تعرضت لأنها تفقد حتى أرضياتها، يعني حتى الأرضية بتاعت المدارس في مدارس فقدتها، فيبقى الخسائر كانت كبيرة جدا جدا على المدارس وعلى الطلاب.
بسبب عدم السكن أنا وأطفالي السنة اللي فاتت برضو ما نزلتهم مدارس، لأنه في كل مرة كنت بمشي أفتش لبيت ما مستقرة نفسيا، هم ما مستقرين نفسيا، أنا ما مستقرة ماديا، لكن أنا أصريت إن أنا ما أضيع لهم مستقبلهم بالرغم من المآسي، حتى إذا أنا ما لقيت مأوى لكن لازم يواصلوا تعليمهم.
عندي ولدين الحمد لله بربي فيهم مع أبوي وأمي، يعني ما محوجيني على شيء، يعني كان ما عندي أمل إنه أنا أعيش ثاني، بس فكرت إنه أخلي الحياة دي كلها ورا، أنزل المدرسة وهي كلها سنة بس واحدة أمتحن فيها الشهادة وأشيلها، يكون عملي بس مستقبل لأولادي قدام.
في بعض الأسر لحد الآن ما قدرت تواصل بسبب عدم قدرتها على تحمل مصاريف الدراسة. يعني الدراسة عايزة، يعني الطالب لو عندي أنا مثلا عندي أربعة أطفال عايزين لبس، عايزين كتب، عايزين كراسات، عايزين أحذية، يعني مصاريف كثيرة جدا جدا، وقد يكون رب الأسرة اتغير تماما من الحالة اللي كان بيعيشها. تقريبا شهر 4 وما قبل شهر 4 كانت العددية بسيطة. ليه؟ لأنه كانوا مشتتين، يعني النزوح ده لما نزحوا، من نزح الشرق منهم من نزح الشمال فتفرقوا، لكن العودة بدت بعد ذاك شنو؟ بطيئة، تدريجيا. يعني هسه أنا الطالبات العادوا أو هسه مستقرات دي النسبة الكبيرة. في طالبات ما رجعوا، وما عارفة عنهم حاجة، يعني ما عارفة ظرفهم شنو. هل عادوا وآثروا إنهم يمشوا مدارس تانية؟ ما عندي فكرة. هل قعدوا واستقروا في الولايات اللي نزحوا ليها؟ ما عندي فكرة. لكن الناس الجوني متأخرين كانوا بيجوا، يعني بكل فترة بيجوني طالبة وطالبتين وثلاثة، والحمد لله رب العالمين بديل معظمهم الجو ديلا وجدوا بيئة هناك واصلوا دراستهم فيها.
كانت عندي رغبة كبيرة شديد إنهم يتفوقوا، فكنت بعمل جلسات لمادة الرياضيات والعربي والإنجليزي لأولادي ولأولاد الجيران، يعني ما لمهم براهم. كنت عاملة فصول دراسية، والكلام ده قبل كده برضو عملته كان في مدرسة أبو حراس، وتقريبا أنا أول واحدة في المدرسة. كنت هناك درست الطلبة، وكنت بطلعهم بدرسهم نشيد العالم وكده عشان انسيهم الحرب وويلاته، والكلام ده برضه طبقته على اولادي في البيت. بديت اقرا معاهم واشيل لهم الحاله النفسيه اللي في نفسهم، لكن برضه بيرجعوا بيقولوا لي والله يا امي نحن دايرين نقرا في المدرسه، نحن ما دايرين نقرا في البيت، نحن المفروض نحن نمشي المدرسه او المفروض نمشي نقرا يا امي بطرحنا حاجه تانية. اقول لهم اي حاجه ان شاء الله حتترتب.
يعني الوحدة ما تخجل ولا تخاف من المجتمع، لأنه الشي ده ما بإرادته، ده ربنا قاسم لها كده. يعني شغلة ده إجباري عادي، في دق ونهب ويسرقوك، يعني ما بخلوا لك حاجة، واحتداءات فظيعة لدرجة إنه تحصل لو فيض عديل بيموتن البنات دي، وبتخش في حالة نفسية. يعني الواحدة لما تجي ماشية تاني بتقول ما بتطلع برا، المجتمع كله بيشوفها وبيقول البنت دي كده وفلان دي كده، يعني تاني راجل بيجي بيتزوجها ما لا، الكلام ده ربنا كاتب لهم كده وقاسم لهم. يعني الليلة انت جيتي طالعة ماشية في الشارع ما توطي راسك، ترفعي راسك انت وماشية.
والله يعني كنت مترددة وحبة شوية. بعد أول المدرسة فتحت أبيت ما أنزل، قلت أقعد، لأن أنا كنت الأيامات ديك مشوشة بالي وما في بعض وكده. نزلت بعد المدرسة عملت 3 أسابيع حتى نزلت الأسبوع الرابع. نزلت يعني بس عندي شنطتي القديمة ديك حقت النزوع، يبقى نزلت باها وعندي 4 كراسات وعندي قلم حبر واحد ورصاص واحد.
أما المشكلة الثانية اللي بتواجه الطالبات الآن هي أنا ما أعرف ده سببه قد يكون من آثار لحد الآن آثار النزوح عدم الاستقرار، لكن في مشكلة في الاستيعاب. يعني نحن نخلص المقررات ما عندنا حصص بنضيعها، الحمد لله رب العالمين المعلمات يعني على أكمل استعداد، لكن كل امتحان بنلقى انه في نسبة بتاع الطالبات ما زال الوضع كما هو.
والله أنا نزلت المدرسة بس عشان أولادي، دار لهم أمل المستقبل لقدام، هم هلا اللي وقفوني على فراعي وقفت والحمد لله. يعني ما كنت أنا ما شغالة بالكلام، بس قاعدة في البيت بس معاهم، يعني ما خدت إنه فكرة إنه أنزل، لكن فجأة كده ربنا رسل لي امتحان دار يمتحني بيه، يعني فجأة نزلت المدرسة. الأسبوع الأول ما كنت عارفه يعني مشوشة وكده، والأسبوع الثاني الحمد لله ما شاء الله من عند صحبان الحمد لله. وفي المدرسة يعني ما ناقصنا شي بس إلا بس الرسم والكتب بس عشان فترة الحرب دي.
داير أمشي جامعة المشيشيبة، لأن أنا بحب الطب، لأن من زمان بشوف الناس لابسين اللابكوت وشايلين السماعات وكده والحاجات زي دي. يعني أنا بتحمس لما أشوف الناس زي دي. أنا قلت أنا بعد أكبر بعدين هيك أنا ذاتي أقرأ طب، وهسي أنا اخترت الطب من هسي.
والله أنا شايلة أصلا دراسات أدبي، ده بعد الشريعة والقانون دي بشيلها كلها حربية. البنات ديل خايفات إنه الشي ده يحصل لهم تاني، لأنه لسه البلد ما في أمان، لأنهم شايفين في الفيس وفي الواسع الإشاعات الناشرينها إنه في الفاشر دي الحاجات اللي حصلت دي حتيجي تحصل لهم تاني. يعني البنات بقى خايفات لو قاعدوا يمشوا المدرسة احتمال يدهمون في المدرسة، يعني أي واحدة أخدت في ذهنها كده.
هسي حاليا اللي علي ده بتمنى لهواتي لهسي بقدر سني ده كده، يعني في السودان هنا يعني ما يكونوا شايلين هم للحصل عليهم والما حصل عليهم، وينزلوا على كل ماشي ويكونوا متكاتفين وما يخافوا من أي شيء، ويعني الداخل الجامعة والفي أساسي أدوبي، يعني إن شاء الله بالتوفيق بنتمنى لهم ونكون من أي خوف.
والله أنا لأخواتي عامة في ولاية السودان كلها، يعني البنات دي لو حصل لهم أي موقف زي الموقف حقنا ده ما الوحدة ما تخاف. فعلا الأيامات الأولى أنت بتكوني خايفة الأسبوع الأول للتاني، لكن تتفادي كيف تكوني مع أهلك تطلعي معاهم يعني ما بدونهم، وتكونوا شنو متفاكرين في أي حاجة تتشاوروا سوا، يعني ما تخلي حاجة تخش فيكي حالة نفسية ولا كده. الوحدة لما تيجي ماشية في الشارع ترفع راسها، ما تنزله، تكون مفتخرة إنه هي الشي ده ما بإرادتها.
أتمنى إنه يعني يشدوا حيلهم ويكونوا على المستوى، يعني بعدين باعتبار أنه دي سنة نحن بنسميها سنة علاجية، عالجنا الفات، بنحاول نعالج الفات. تاني ما في دفعة حتمتحن إلا ما بعد يمكن 2027. فأنا أتمنى إنه الطالبات يستفيدوا من الفرصة دي وما يضيعوها، ويحاولوا يحققوا أكبر قدر من النجاح، وربنا يوفقهم إن شاء الله يا رب العالمين.
Their own sense of security. Yet these realities, women-led organizations, feminist activists, community networks, survivor networks themselves continue to lead the sense of the most critical protection, documentation, and response. So to help us, tech, they can't hear online. So to help us unpack these issues, I'm very, very honored to be joined by two distinguished panelists. I'm pleased to first of all invite my colleague, Adil Taha from Biha Network, whose work has focused on supporting and documenting the experiences of women and girls affected by conflict, while strengthening the feminist response and community-based protection efforts on the ground. Adil has extensive experience in community movement, particularly in the areas of gender justice and gender-based violence. She currently holds leadership positions within the emergency response rooms in Khartoum State, and she's been working to strengthen women's participation in peace building and community engagement. Adil, please join me. Our second panelist is Abdullahi Hassan, a lawyer and conflict researcher currently covering Sudan and Somalia for Amnesty International. He worked with Amnesty International since 2018, where he carried out complex research into various human rights issues, including the impact of US drone strikes on civilians in Somalia, international crimes committed during the ongoing conflict in Sudan, as well as other topics. Since April 2023, Abdullahi has been integral in Amnesty International's response to Sudan conflict, including through major research and advocacy initiatives such as documentation of war crimes, crimes against humanity, how external actors have the conflict. He also advocates for justice for victims and accountability for all violations and abuses being committed against civilians in Sudan. Abdullah has previously worked for 3 years in Africa Division of Human Rights Watch and holds a Bachelor's of Law from University of Nairobi in Kenya and a Master's of Law from Columbia Law School in New York. Abdullah, please come on stage. Together, they will both bring the research perspective and lived realities from the communities across Sudan. So if we could start the conversation, and please help me clap for my guests. And we're deeply running out of time, so we'll try to give enough time for you to speak, but also we'll try to make it brief as much as possible. I'll start with you, Hadil. As we've just heard from the Darfur panel, we've also seen in the movies and the film we just watched from Jazeera, the widespread of sexual violence in Khartoum and Jazeera, and particularly in Khartoum as well, since the conflict started. We know that since the first day of conflict, there has been this widespread of sexual violence. So is there a specific strategy designed by the RSF? What were the patterns of violence based in Khartoum and Jazeera? Are you seeing similarities? And then what is the impact of this for the communities, particularly women and children on the ground?
Thank you, Faizat. And good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I will speak in Arabic. It will be comfortable. Mainly, I request you to use the translation. This. طيب يعني من اندلاع الحرب في 2023 زي ما كلنا عارفين تواجه السودان
The Sudanese has faced a very serious situation since the outbreak of the war. In 2023, there was a serious armed conflict, and civilians were held hostage. And amongst this, as you know, that Khartoum has thousands and millions of civilians. They were stuck in this confrontation. There was killing, there was starving. People were forcibly starved during the first. But Sudanese women and girls were systematically subjected to the use of sexual violence as weapon since day one. In the war of 2023, we started getting reports of sexual violence. We received 3 reports of sexual violence since day one of the war. Let us, we have to ask the question, the high level of sexual violence, was it the beginning, the first? Never. Before 2023, the history of the Sudanese state is filled with violations against civilians, in particular for sexual violence against women and girls, and this has been there for throughout our long history, be that the war in southern Sudan, which was accompanied by a horrible and bleak record of the worst type of sexual violence practiced against the Southerners, and they were part of the Sudanese state, followed by the war in Darfur in 2004. They only just changed the name from Janjaweed to RSF. At that time, they were supported by the Sudanese armed forces that has taken part in the commission of these violations. And before the Southern War, Sudan has been through similar incidents during the Mahdiya state time. The same pattern, the same form, the same volume during the Mahdiya time in the 19th century. There might be some slight differences in some details. The same pattern was used whereby women were subjected sexual violence in a systematic way. Were there a specific mechanism? Yes, the RSF has used sexual violence as a weapon, as a strategy to vacate and control the cities and towns. When we started our journey for documenting sexual violence in Saiha, we have noticed that there are certain patterns that are repeatedly made linked to the first days. Whenever they enter into any area, what would happen? They use sexual violence during the first days to force the civilians leave the area so that they can move easily, control the houses, loot the rations in these houses, and to control the area. And that's when we start getting from our caseworkers, we start getting phone calls, messages that there are incidents of sexual violence taking place, just like the first day of the war. On the first day of war, there were documented cases of sexual violence. It has been used a mechanism to empty the towns, and mechanism for declaring victory and for revenge. We started getting many messages that women and girls were subjected to sexual violence, and that they are asking for our assistance in this. As my colleague Faizat have responded to the question, that we in Seha has been maintaining the same strategy and responses to provide these services and protection to the victims or survivors. And we adopted the approach of victims approach, victim-centered approach in any response we make. Starting from the question that Flavia said, the question that we have to ask them, what do you want? The word victim or survivor is for them to choose. We would ask them, do you consider yourself a victim or survivor, victim or survivor, because here the victims are the center. And then we ask, how do you want us to help you? We take into consideration that the victims may not have the mental capacity to. That's why we insist on having contacts with the victims and the families with the caseworker. These cases may happen in front of the sisters and the mother to see the rape taking place before their eyes. As I said, they choose they opt to get into place and to have a wave of sexual violence. And then we have received reports of missing women. You may remember that during there was first days and month of the war, there was many reports of missing girls and women, and therefore I can say that we cannot speak about forced missing without referring to sexual violence. It's not a separate, isolated. Forced disappearance is linked to sexual violence. Women or girls taken forcibly from their families, for sure they are they've been subjected to a repeated sexual violence cases, and that's why families may respond to the disappearance from disappearing girls is harsher for them than the death. The impact of the forced disappearance has more deeper, devastating, and longer impact on the families and communities. I remember when the RSF was controlling Jazeera after defection of Kekel, and they started the revenge campaign on East Jazeera. There were many cases of girls that have disappeared. One of their methodology is to hijack girls as a way of humiliation and forcing these families. At that time, we were working in Jazeera and we had access to reach the victims and survivors, and we helped in arranging for mass move them in mass from East Jazeera to other areas like Kashmir, Girba, and others. At that time, there was a father. Father was saying that they took my three daughters. He was just repeating that sentence. They took my three daughters. The same father, after a week when he arrived to Kashmir Girba and settled and started getting control over himself, he changed his narrative completely. He said that my daughters were killed and I buried them in the house. I moved. It was easier for him to accept that fact. For his own narrative, it's he preferred to say that his daughters died, better than having other narratives vis-a-vis the community when they ask about where are your daughters, where are they? Because for them, forced disappearance is linked to sexual violence. No girls are taken forcibly. In some cases, they are forcibly married, which is another form of sexual violence. There were many narratives of this kind when they entered Jazeera. At that time, we can confirm through the documentation and the work we did there, we can confirm that this incident happened in East Jazeera door to door, not a single household that was saved from these violations. And also we have documented cases of rape of males and men and boys. When we speak about sexual violence, we should not forget that there was sexual violence against men and boys. This has been even before the 2023 war on the documentation was substantiated by reports and the patterns used by the RSF to get into the towns and control them. There were reports made by the UNO's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. They have reported cases of girls who were held in detention center in Riyadh in Khartoum, and these girls were systematically raped. In response to the question, the sexual violence was not an isolated incident, it was rather systematic tool used and a declaration of their victory. Rape was a way for revenge. When the RSF started the revenge campaign in East Jazeera, they tried. The women went into the mosques, being there for days and out of the belief that the religious premises would be respected. Unfortunately, these mosques were invaded, girls were raped, and men were killed inside the mosques. I will stop here.
There in terms of the patterns and what we are seeing. I think for me, one thing that came out clearly is also a reminder that the change of name does not equal change of behavior. These patterns have been before the current war. So the fact that they change their name RSF now does not mean that it's stopping or changing the continued use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. I'm going to talk to you now, Abdullahi, and of course we've heard from Adil very clearly in the context of Khartoum and Jazeera. But we also know that in 2025, Amnesty International released a report titled "They Raped Us All," which also documents the extent of the sexual violence in these areas. Can you also tell us, what other patterns came out or were emerging from your research, and then what impacts were uncovered by the research team?
Thank you so much for that, and thanks everyone for coming today and for listening to this very important conversation. Right, we issued a report in 2025. The report was titled "They Raped All of Us," which from the title of the report, you can tell that we were speaking to many women and girls from Sudan who told us that they were raped by the rapid support forces. In that particular investigation, all the cases we documented were all the rape cases or gang rape cases or conflict-related sexual violence cases that we documented were committed by the rapid support forces. And the title of the report came from one testimony where a woman who we interviewed said there were about 20 of them who were abducted by the RSF from a location near Al Fashir. Then in 2024, they were moved to a village and all the women were raped. So in her testimony to us, she said they raped all of us. And that is how that is what we titled the report. But then this conflict-related sexual violence across Sudan has been similar. It has followed a similar pattern when from the beginning of 2023, when the RSF and the Sudanese army started fighting, allegations of sexual violence have emerged from across the country, from Khartoum to Jazeera to Darfur to other parts of the country. But then for the purposes of this discussion, the focus is on Khartoum and Jazeera. In that particular research, we also found similar patterns of violence, conflict-related sexual violence, both in Khartoum and in Jazeera. For example, in Khartoum, we interviewed women and girls who said they have been subjected to various forms of conflict-related sexual violence. This included rape, it included gang rape, and gang rape is a situation where several perpetrators subjected rape to a single woman or several women. And this has been a lot in the context of Khartoum specifically. There was a lot of gang rape where RSF were gang raping women and girls. And the third key finding we found was there was also sexual slavery, where women were confined or were detained or were deprived of their liberty to move from a situation where they were subjected to sexual violence repeatedly by either one individual or by several individuals, several fighters for several days, at least 1 week or 30 days. And we had these cases in Khartoum particularly. In terms of who was subjected, who was targeted with sexual violence, we found um, all women from Khartoum or Jazeera were actually subjected to sexual violence. We interviewed doctors, for example, we interviewed women rights defenders, we interviewed activists, we interviewed students who all were subjected to sexual violence in different settings. For example, they were women and girls were raped in their homes or were raped in their workplaces. For example, some women were raped in their own pharmacies or in hospitals where they were treating injured people, or were raped when they were fleeing and trying to seek safety. For example, we interviewed a number of women who were raped by the RSF while they were trying to flee from Khartoum, going to Madani in Jazeera. So they will separate women from men and will subject women to sexual violence. Women were also raped or gang raped in residential areas. In our report, our main conclusion, our main finding was that women and girls in Sudan were subjected to rape, gang rape, and sexual slavery, which is what I just described. And secondly, we also concluded that the rape carried out by RSF across Sudan, including in Jazeera and Khartoum, was widespread and systematic, and it amounted to a crime against humanity. We said it was widespread and systematic for a number of reasons. One is the number of women who were subject to sexual violence were many. I don't want to give a number because the numbers actually differ. Some organizations are talking of hundreds of women. Some are talking of thousands. Some are talking of tens of thousands. So the number is really big. So I don't want to put a number. But then there was an incredibly high number of women who were subjected to sexual violence. And then two, the locations in which these violations are taking place are many as well. It's not only one specific location. It took place in Khartoum, in Jazeera, in Darfur, and other places from 2023 to up to today, actually. In all the reports we issued since the conflict erupted in Sudan, including one that we will release next week on the violence that had taken place in Al-Fashir, we always included a section on sexual violence against women and girls. So that tells you then that we were able to find this particular violation across the country. And then the third one is, which is why we were saying it is systematic. The RSF did not appear in most cases, in all the cases actually, to be hiding what they were doing. They were doing it in front of others. For example, they were doing it in front of their own fighters, or they were raping women and girls in front of family members. So in many instances, we documented cases where women and girls were raped in front of family members. And then rape and other forms of sexual violence were committed in various settings, in homes, on the road, in checkpoints, in hospitals, in residential areas, and so on and so forth. And lastly, RSF leaders must have known that RSF fighters have been engaging in this activity from the beginning of the conflict, because organizations like SIHA and others have already been talking about sexual violence committed in Sudan in early 2023 when the conflict erupted. So that's why we concluded it is both widespread and systematic. So in terms of the impact it had on sexual violence, conflict-related sexual violence had on women and girls in Sudan, we don't have a lot of time, but I can summarize it in three ways. One, survivors of sexual violence that we interviewed suffered both physical injuries and psychological trauma. Some developed health conditions, including walking difficulties, irregular periods, kidney pains, and so on and so forth. Survivors also suffered psychological trauma and have developed occasional memory loss. For example, a number of women we interviewed said they can no longer remember events, or they are having nightmares when they sleep at night. That's number one. Number two, all the women we interviewed said they had difficulty accessing healthcare. So none of them actually that we interviewed had access to health facilities because of the generalized violence and because of inability to have access. And lastly, they talked about stigma and fear of reporting. So the community generally stigmatizes survivors of rape and other forms of sexual violence. So it's even very difficult to speak about the experiences of women in that context, both within the society, but also it is very difficult to report even to authorities where there are authorities. And as Flavia said, and as Adil also was talking about the survivors-centered approach, we were asking survivors specific questions on what they wanted to happen. And two things came up predominantly in their responses. One was they wanted access to medical checkups and immediate medical checkups. They also mentioned they wanted justice and accountability. And finally, in terms of, I want to conclude my remarks by one testimony from one of the survivors, because I think this particular testimony stuck with me from the day we did the interview. I did interview a lot of survivors and victims from various settings, but then this particular incident actually remained with me because it shows the level of suffering of survivors of sexual violence. And that particular incident was grave. It took place in Jazeera, in Al Samir village in Jazeera, where that is where the survivor is from. And she said, so three key things happened in this particular incident. One is, as a result of the rape, the woman got pregnant and she got a baby boy out of that rape. And she was holding that baby when we were interviewing her. That's one. And two, she said she felt humiliated because she was raped in front of her family members, including her daughters and her son, an 11-year-old son. And then that 11-year-old son tried to protect his mom from the RSF while they were raping her. So he ran to them. He tried to scream and say, please leave my mom alone. Please don't do this to my mom. And then they hit him in the back with the back of their gun. And he suffered a very bad injury in his back. And he died 11 days later as a result of that. So she said, after Isha prayers, 7 RSF soldiers came to our house in Al Samir village in Jazeera. 2 of them came to me in our veranda where I was standing. One of them forcefully tied my arms behind my back and the other raped me in front of my 11-year-old son and daughter. My son screamed at them, saying, "Please leave my mother alone. Stay away from my mom." One of them hit my son in the back with his gun butt and broke his backbone. My beloved son, Muhammad, that's not his real name, died 17 days later. I became pregnant because of the rape and just gave birth to a baby boy about a month and a half ago here in Uganda. I have not received any medical treatment since. I am afraid that I might be sick. I would like to have medical checkup to make sure that I have not been infected with any disease. So that is the testimony from Amina. Amina is not her real name, but she's one of the survivors we interviewed for that particular research. So I think I will stop there for that part.
Thank you very much, Abdullah and Hadil. I think from what I am hearing from both accounts, it's clear that, gang rape was definitely one of the clear patterns for the RSF invasion. Sexual slavery, enforced disappearance, the fact that it can happen in any location, whether people are fleeing, whether they're in their location, whether they're in their homes, and the fact that it didn't matter who or what was looking, it's being done. And I think the points that you've also raised, Abdullah, about I'm looking at the principle of command responsibility, and I think we'll talk about the accountability later. The fact that they were aware, and you feel like the what's it called, the commanders are aware. So it's intentional. It's being it's an instruction more or less as part of the patterns. And you and Hadil have brought that out very clearly. And Hadil even mentioned the fact that even starvation was also used, in as part of this weapon of war. So to help us move closer to concluding, we've painted this very grim picture of what the sexual violence is and conflict-related sexual violence. But we also want to know, with Hadil, how did feminist organizations respond? How did women's rights organization and the whole community in terms of documenting and responding to this ongoing CRSV? I'm hearing Abdullah saying there's still a lot of women out there that needs support and response. So what are the successes? What are the barriers? And what support is currently needed, to support the victims of conflict-related sexual violence?
طيب أول حاجة أنا يعني لاحظت إنه لما زميل عبد الله بيتكلم يعني عن القصص وروايات الناجيات والضحايا إنه يعني الحضور يعني
that it was very evident in the faces of the audience how shocking it was. This is a reality. This is war in Sudan. And I would like to say what's even more important, at ease. We don't mention names, numbers. It's very disturbing to say that there are 1,200 cases of forced disappearance have been reported, etc. That our sources have been turned into numbers. I encourage our partners and colleagues to maintain it's enough that feminist groups and the women grassroots organizations, definitely women have played a central, basic and pivotal role in regulating, organizing themselves to make the lives of the Sudanese in areas under siege during wartime to enable them to survive and to escape these atrocities. Before I start talking about certain organizations that have their structure and organization, this war, since the first weeks, we start getting calls in the social media for mothers who were seeking help from others to help them in burying the dead who died for many days, to help them in burying this. And we have got the news stories of women who buried their own kids inside their homes. And then we had that strong wave of starvation and absence of lack of water that affected. And during these days, the RSF was accusing any man caught in the streets as a collaborator. They would be men were forced to leave their families inside Khartoum, or they would stay in their homes and to allow the women to go in search of food and water. Women took the lead in saving their families from early days. For us in Seha, because of the shock and the multiple cases we're receiving, it caused us to be confused as we were getting hundreds and tens of messages seeking assistance and documentation of sexual violence. We found out later on that our long-term investment with the grassroots groups and women groups, feminist groups before war or before the glorious December Revolution had borne fruits. Those women quickly started organizing themselves to help in getting access to different groups on how to move, how to organize themselves, how to reach out to us using different ways, especially with the internet being cut off. The investment in these grassroots organizations was the best investment. Women who were part of the cooperatives, societies, food sellers, and the ordinary women, lay women who were focusing mostly with their households, families, and neighborhoods. They supported us up to now to reach out to the communities. The confidence the trust we have built with them have enabled us to maintain communication. The feminist rooms and emergency rooms were the basic forms of organization, particularly the women in response rooms. This was a very creative way. It was the first time for the women to have their own rooms as part of the emergency response rooms, and they would get some rations, though very scarce, but they could distribute for the needy in the area. And as my colleague Ikhlas said, that the community kitchens, which was a very creative ways, the kaya or the soup kitchens, these were not only places for making food, but it was a gathering area for women to see how to resolve problems of water, how to get the pregnancy, the sanitary pads. At a certain moment, there was not these sanitary pads, unfortunately. The organizations that should have provided this were not there, leaving them to face this reality in their own. It was a responsibility, and they managed to respond in providing these needs at that time. In short, Women played a central role in documenting sexual violence and responding to cases of sexual violence, and they were first point of contact, and they would be charged on providing different services to women victims and women survivors. I want also to speak about the successes. It was not bleak throughout, as the class said. They were not just beneficiaries, rather they were also partners providing services, suggesting services, how should they be provided, where and how. Amongst the successes we had, which are linked to the impact. Earlier, I did not have an opportunity
طبعا في آثار كثيرة يعني
to speak about what happened. They were direct. Some women were impregnated with kids facing complications on how to do the abortion, how to do the legal, or even they decide to keep the child. What should get, how to get papers for their kids. There was a pressure on the Ministry of Social Welfare, which had to respond. They provided them with birth certificates, and there was another dimension related to displacement and cost, the medical and psychological impacts, and drop out of schools. Many families decided to keep their kids in their households as a form of protection. Forced marriage, early marriage, and family and FGM. We had a relapse. We started getting stories of kids married at the age of 13 to protect, or marrying them to their cousins as a source of protection. And FGM, people thought of the circumcision as a protection for them, as it may help them if they are subjected to anything as horrible as rape. Divorce, family fragmentation. Many reports have been made about divorce and family fragmentation, which is direct result of war. And the worst part is the accusation of collaboration with the enemy. And we are working on this at Saiha, of accusing women, incriminating them for collaborating with the enemy in both areas, RSF or SAF. SAF areas, women are accused of taking part, collaborating with the RSF, and they are sentenced for to death. They're given death. The same for RSF. Niala prison is congested with men and women who are being held for the successes of the women groups, how they worked and operated during the war, and how they organized themselves. As a result, more light was shed on the sexual violence violations. Despite the shortage of resources, when you have the resources are primarily provided for the sexual violence or women needs, they are very meager. These resources are not sufficient, and therefore there were some services provided to survivors. Women succeeded in establishing their local networks that are capable and trained to some extent in responding. There are obstacles facing these women. Some of them are related to the security situation. You must have followed up. Working in Sudanese army areas of control, many the registration, giving them the license to work, and to the donors who have very harsh and strict conditions for these groups to be funded. They must be registered and have their own bank accounts, which takes which is time consuming. It takes time. A week protection mechanisms, not only for victims and survivors, even for the activists and those who are working on documentation. They are subjected to serious accusations. Some of them are accused of collaboration. They are documenting for whom? Definitely the atrocities committed by SAF as well. In conclusion, I know Faizat is not happy. Despite all the challenges, the women groups, feminist groups, and women-led organizations are taking the lead in any efforts to document sexual violence, and they have high capability of being resilient, creating effective new methods, which requires resources, commitment, and protection to ensure accountability and realization of justice. And definitely it requires political will. There was a question raised. Are we going to just keep an eye watching the Al Ubaid and to have the Al Fashir case repeated? Unfortunately, this is taking place, and I don't want to, did not want to say this, but soon we will have Al Ubaid falling, and sexual violence will be used as a weapon of war. Unfortunately, the silence of the international community, which is keeping an eye on the Lobait without taking any action, and unfortunately, all the negotiations taking place recently, led by the Quad or the Quintet. The quintet is working with all groups. They are reaching out to all, and they can see what is happening in Al Ubaid, in southern Blue Nile, North Kordofan, South Kordofan. The whole world is watching what's happening there. Unfortunately, they are not going to take any action. It's very clear that they are negotiating on other things not related to the protection of civilians, and you must have followed up the serious the discussion in the last meeting, the recent meeting in Addis, that there were some groups that left as they were keen on naming the Islamic movement and affiliates. Unfortunately, none is talking about the naming of the Islamic movement and affiliates, as well as the RSF and affiliates. And it's very clear that we have to wait for another 30 years to recognize what has happened in the Sudan and to name the violators. Thank you.
Going to try to summarize or explain what you've just gone over extensively. I'm just going to go to Abdullah as we wrap up to say that, I mean, you've listened to Adil talk extensively and covered so much, and also how the women's organization are responding, but also in looking at the patterns continuously. And Amnesty International, you have also linked these patterns of violence to the Commission of War Crimes and then Crimes Against Humanity by RSF. In light of the ICC's jurisdiction limitation, of course, limited to Darfur right now, and I think Abdul Basit and has also tried to give some recommendations earlier. What can be done for us to extend this jurisdiction and ensure justice and accountability for survivors across Sudan? You've also clearly highlighted in your conversation with survivors that one thing that is clear is justice. Aside from immediate response, justice, was the second question. So if you can share any current international or regional justice systems that can be strengthened or that can help us curb this immunity more effectively.
Thank you, Faizat. I think, yes, the survivors are actually also demanding accountability. They're demanding justice for what happened to them. But also, I think it's very important for us to remember that impunity is one of the key root causes of the conflict of Sudan. Uh, the the same actors that are involved in the current conflict are the same actors who have committed various violations over the past few years in Sudan. So the issue of accountability is very important. Uh, the same way protection of civilians is important is the same way accountability is important. That's number one. Number two, I think Abdul Basi talked about documentation for the purposes of accountability. That is very important because documentation will allow organizations and individuals to keep track of and document and preserve the evidence of violations that have occurred in Sudan during this period, especially during this conflict. So more documentation, intentional documentation for accountability purposes from civil society organizations, from individuals, from journalists is key. And this information can be fed to the various accountability mechanisms that exist. Number three, at Amnesty, we have been advocating for the formation since the beginning of the conflict. We have been advocating for the formation of genuine accountability mechanisms for Sudan. One of the key accountability mechanisms we advocated for was the existing UN fact-finding mission, which was established by the UN Human Rights Council. There is another accountability mechanism established by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, the ACHPR, which is also working now in parallel to the UN fact-finding mission. Then thirdly is the ICC, which has jurisdiction over Darfur. For the ICC, we were demanding two things. One is the UN Security Council to extend the mandate of the ICC from just Darfur to the rest of the country, because the conflict is currently not only ongoing in Darfur, but it's covering the whole country. So the expansion of the ICC jurisdiction is key, although it has not happened for the past 3 years now. So in general, we have been calling or advocating for the maintenance and the proper resourcing of these existing accountability mechanisms. And here we are talking about the ICC, the UN fact-finding mission, and the African Commission ACHPR fact-finding mission. Those existing accountability mechanisms need to be strengthened whenever their mandate ends. In the case of the UN fact-finding mission and the African Commission fact-finding mission, their mandates to be extended and they to be properly resourced, given enough resources for them to be able to document cases. Number four is the issue of universal jurisdiction, which Abdul Basit talked about extensively. I don't want to go back into that, but then encouraging states to apply universal jurisdiction in their territories is another key key thing for accountability in Sudan. We have had the ICC indict one individual last year after 20 years of investigations. I think there were mixed reactions to that. Some people are wondering why the ICC took 20 years to indict only one individual. On the other hand, some people who believe that justice might take a very long time, even if it is after 20 years, individuals who are committing violations in Sudan today will one day be held accountable, who are happy because at least there was some sort of accountability for what happened 20 years ago in Sudan. So hopefully there will be accountability for the ongoing violations, including conflict-related sexual violence. And lastly, I think it is very important that right now we also prioritize protection of civilians. we are hearing the warnings around Al Ubaid and what is likely to happen. Someone was telling me it could be worse than Al Fashir because of the sheer number of people who are displaced or who live in Al Ubaid. Over 3 million people are said to be in Al Ubaid currently, which is being surrounded by the RSF. I think robust diplomatic pressure is needed from the international community on the parties to the conflict to ensure that a repeat of what happened in Al Fashir does not happen again in Al Ubaid. Number one. And number two, I think there is also significant diplomatic pressure is also needed to be exerted on both the Sudanese army and the RSF to achieve an immediate ceasefire so that this conflict ends and the violation also that comes with it end. But also, someone was talking about the deployment of a protection force. I think it is high time for the UN Security Council and the African Union Peace and Security Council to also consider immediately to deploy civilian protection forces to areas in Sudan where civilian suffering is likely to happen, including in Al Ubaid, in Al Fashir, in Khartoum, and in other places, so that we not only strengthen accountability, but also ensure there is protection of civilians in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdullah and Adil. I think this has been very enlightening, and a lot has been covered. Just before I do a summary wrap up, I would like to open it to the floor to see if we have. I know we're all tired and we are past time, but if there's just any questions or comment before we close the session. None? Okay, one over there, please.
It's just a comment. I think from this conversation and all conversations we are having about sexual violence in Sudan, I think it is important that we always have centralized the message of interim measures to respond to the needs of victims and survivors. So in all conversations, in all forums, that it is important to have interim measures because, I mean, the situation is heartbreaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback and comment. Anyone else? Just one more person at the back.
Thank you. My question is to Hadil from Saiha. You spoke about women groups and grassroots groups and how investing in them throughout the past, say, 30 or since I have started working in Sudan has affected us or has finally reaped what it sow. But I was about to ask that during the past 3 years, how different how vastly different the interventions done by Saiha, how were they changed as grassroots groups started going to the leading the frontline interventions, and the interventions started coming from the ground up, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. Adil, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to give your remark.
As I mentioned, our investment in these groups and the grassroots organizations enable them to organize themselves and to respond. After the war, definitely things have changed. They're not as they used to be before war. We started using different mechanisms in responding on to respond, how to reach out to them, how to make them part of our response through small grants that would allow them would give them more space to respond to needs, their actual needs, how to have the capacity to help their communities and themselves. On the ground, they have not been through the same situation. Things have been eroded or overtaken. The organizations that were in Khartoum were either disbanded, people displaced to different areas. Some have survived, however. They were from different regions, but they came together and worked together. The situation now is changing, definitely. There are new groups on the ground, different from those used to exist. There are other old groups, but they are operating using different names in order to protect themselves or for the situation now is changing. If you are to operate in Khartoum, which was the capital, and the work was more organized, but you have now to restart differently. The composition is different. There are some who disappeared completely and others who have just emerged. Shukran.
I'll give you also just 30 seconds for any final parting words and then.
No, thank you again for organizing this. I think it is really key that we remember the people of Sudan generally during this difficult period, but also the specific violations that are facing women and girls particularly. Numerous organizations and entities have spoken about the level of sexual violence and the prevalence of sexual violence, particularly in the country, the need for urgent, response in terms of both protection, but also medical access for women and girls and psychosocial support for women and girls who have been impacted. I think we need to reiterate that it is important for the international community to increase humanitarian support, especially in this area, and for women-led organizations that are leading the response to also receive both the support they need, but also the access they need on the ground. So I think I will conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdullah and Hadil. I think from the session we've heard clearly. What is clear is that the use of sexual violence in Sudan is deliberate and intentional. We've heard how it has happened in Darfur, it's in Khartoum, it's in Jazeera, and other places that is not yet known. We've known that we've seen that the pattern also is that in the first couple of days that there is an invasion is when this sexual violence occurs. Something that has also come out clearly from the conversations that we are having is that early warning signs are telling us that the same is about to happen in El Obeid. And what are we doing about it? What do we need to be doing about it? How do we ensure that we do not have the same women and girls going through the same things again that we've seen in videos and the testimonies that we've seen in this room today? We've heard how women's groups are organizing and responding to each of these situations and continue to provide that response. Maybe to add to what the question about, how has CIHA changed or, what changed? I think one of the things that worked out for CIHA the most is the fact that we are trusted network within Sudan. And we have existed, like you said, 30 years, but we've never backed out and never backed out of either responding or supporting the groups that we've always responded to. When everyone was leaving Sudan, when the conflicts happened, was when we were deepening our roots again in Sudan, responding rather than leaving, because that is our community and that is our home. And the women and girls that we work with are our partners, and we stand together with them regardless of the conflict or what is going on. So that is what has pushed us, but is also what has helped us. We had done trainings with the groups in the past. So it was not difficult to see them taking leadership and ownership once the conflict started and how to respond. I think also just to go back to what Abdullah has said, there are so many things that we look forward to in terms of, the question is if it takes ICC 20 years to indict one person, then what are we documenting for? That's a question, but we are not giving up because we were told that our documentation was poor, which is why it was difficult to indict. So we're giving all our resources and time to ensure that we're doing it right. And we're hoping that it doesn't take another 20 years to see justice and accountability in Sudan. Justice comes in different form, from local justice mechanisms, reparation, transitional justice, all forms of justice. And for victims of sexual violence, and particularly listening to some of the videos, it's not something that erases within a day. It's not something that is going to go away within a month. It's something that is a lifelong change that has happened to somebody that can never be taken back. So as we reflect and as we go away from here, I think we should just continue to have Sudan on our minds. We should keep Sudan on our eyes. We should keep Sudan in our mouth and make sure that we continue to call for justice and accountability. We continue to provide and resource organizations working on the ground to ensure that response is reaching the right people on the ground. Before we close, I just really want to say thank you to IN Network. The two videos that we showed earlier was done in partnership with them. So we really do appreciate our partnership and contribution. And of course to Amnesty, Abdullah and Flavia for, co-implementing or co-having this space. And then to all of you who took your time, despite the fact that we've gone over time, I do really appreciate your patience. I do appreciate you sitting and staying through till the end. We really do appreciate it. And just thank you all for being here. And we do have some snacks at the end. I see that they're also looking at me like, we want to leave here. So thank you so much. And please give a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you.